Hello and welcome to Stand By Please with Jackie George from Sharjah Performing Arts Academy and me, Antonia Collins from the Bamboo Manager Project. In this podcast we talk all things stage management. Join us and our guests as we try to answer the question, what is your stage manager really thinking? We hope you enjoy. Good afternoon, here we are again.
Yes, indeed. Well, it was lovely to do the first one of season 4, so we thought let's go for episode 2.
I know. I think we were both a bit out of practice, weren't we? It was a little bit of a surprise, the last episode.
Yes, it was. And so many things have happened in that year. And I think a bit of time and a bit of space, and you realise what a good thing is. So it's nice to be back.
Absolutely. Today's episode, though, is another, what I would say, Antonia Collins classic. Antonia has things she would like to discuss, and Jackie's going to help her do it. Because today I wanted us to talk about how do we define success? And actually, I think the subtitle is going to be let's be kinder to ourselves, actually. Because when you work in an industry that has quite high profile elements, let's go with that. So, we saw this in COVID, didn't we? We saw how little the general public understood what goes on behind the scenes in a theatre show. And I feel like we've been our own worst enemy over this, absolutely. But then we've also got this weird thing about what do we consider to be success, and what does success look like, and what kind of work is, I'm going to put it in air inverted commas, significant. And to somebody who doesn't work in the entertainment industry, they probably think that means the West End or New York and Broadway. They wouldn't think about it being some tiny play in, on a beach in somewhere in West Wales for 12 people. They wouldn't think about it in the same way. And I just wanted us to unpack success a bit.
I don't think it's outside of the industry. I think there's a certain snobbery and a certain judgment of people within the industry as well, that if you aren't working high profile shows, or what they deem or what certain people consider to be high profile shows, and maybe we'll have a little breakdown of what the criteria for those are, then you're not successful. But I think we need to separate it. I think when I think about personal success, like what are my parameters for my success professionally? And then what's the framework of success for my industry or our industry? So if we look at our industry, I think we've mentioned this before, in that by nature of what we do, we're quite good at inward reflection and looking at what we do, and we're very self-aware and self-critical in terms of what we do professionally, I think, as stage management. But we're also quite outward looking, and we're always looking at what someone else is doing, or what others are doing, or how do they do it, or what's the best way to do it. So I think by nature of that, but following on from that, then we look at what's successful, what's the next step, what do other people consider to be success, and the next step. And I think there is a judgment that we should be aiming for large scale commercial West End / Broadway show roles, but the nature of the work for some people, A, doesn't suit their working style, and B, doesn't make them happy. So industry wise, I think there is a marker there that scale of work is what success is. But personally, what are our own markers of success? What do you do in your daily professional practice that you go, that's great, that's really worked, I'm really proud of that, or I'm really pleased that happened?
If a student came to you and said, if when I'm a professional stage manager, if I work for a small scale company that do really interesting work, does that make me a lesser stage manager than if I was the stage manager of Hamilton on Broadway? What would you say?
Absolutely not. Because a stage manager on a one person national tour with a transit van takes a different skill set to a 5 person stage management team on a big residential commercial show. Isn't it?
Exactly. And yet we still use some of those things as the markers of success. And if you, oh my God, if that's what you want to do and you have a job doing that, amazing, brilliant. That's not my point at all. My point is, why are we quite so harsh on ourselves? Professionally, each job brings a different challenge, doesn't it? And I'm grateful for the challenge, and I'm grateful for the variety. And that doesn't mean that in the future I might not want to do a show that is more commercial or in London or whatever. But I like the creative process. What makes it successful? Yes, that it's got a decent paycheck. Yes, you know me, I'll be totally honest about that, because I believe we should be properly paid. Thanks. It's not a hobby. But also, if it is a great bunch of people and it's a good bunch of humans and the show happens to be great as well, then that's kind of an added bonus at the end of the day, because it's not always like that. It could be a great bunch of humans and the show is terrible. That's not a given, is it? But the people who you get, who you're spending all this time with, and it is very intensive, especially in tech, or if you're out on tour, then the relationships with those people is really vital. So they need to be more successful than the show, I would say.
And when I look at your career, what I admire the most and what I think how it's successfully defined is 2 things. Is that the first one is that you find joy and enthusiasm and passion for whatever you're doing, whether that's your teaching work or whether that's doing shows, whether that's doing a show in a different language we've just been talking about. So you embrace the challenge. And I never hear you talk about your professional work with a sort of lethargy or again, if there's always an enthusiasm and a passion there. So that's one for me. I absolutely think, well, that's got to be a mark of success. The second one is how you really easily flip between doing the job and teaching the job. And I think that they both feed into each other. But when I look at your career, I think that's where I see your success, and that's what I really celebrate.
Oh, Jackie, that's lovely. Thanks. What you just described there is my very jumbled up life, because
but it works for you.
It does work for me. It does work for me, and I have very few boundaries. That sounds really wrong. But my teaching work, my passion for theatre, my stage management work are all mushed up together to make me the human that I am. And you're right. I do find joy in I could find joy in anything. And gosh, please, people listening, do not think that I walk around being happy 100% of the time, because I clearly don't. That's, you can ask my husband about that one. But do I love the work? Do I think it is, what's the word I'm looking for? I still believe being a stage manager can be the best job in the world for the right person who has the right, the right approach to it and loves the work. But also I feel gratitude to be able to do something for a living that I mainly, not every moment of every day, obviously, but mainly enjoy. And I think it's the joy that probably comes through a lot more than anything else. But do I wish I'd been a stage manager of a West End show? Yeah, probably, just so that I could say that I'd done it. And I've done off West End, but I've never had a West End credit that's been mine. And isn't it weird that that still bothers me?
Oh, you'd get bored so quickly. I know you too well. Wouldn't you? I think.
I suppose, of course, ironically, you, talking about success, have done the only thing that would tempt me back to full-time teaching. by setting up a program. I think that it's an amazing thing that you have done there, and how brilliant to say that you could do that. But do you miss stage managing? Does that matter to you in the kind of success conversation, or do you think, well, I might come back to that later? Or
who knows? I may come back to it later. I think Matt, my husband, and I, we both have conversations quite often. We both work in theatre. I don't think I've spoken about Matt before. I can't remember. But anyway, we both quite often say we are so fortunate and so lucky that we work in a career that we chose to work in, and we work in a field that we chose to work in, because I know for a lot of people that's not really an option. So I'm always grateful for that. And for me, that's one of my markers of success, in that I actively went out to do this job, and I'm still doing it, and I'm still enjoying it. Absolutely setting up a program, and I realised what the beauty of that, what the next part of maybe that journey is that on your own, you start off with this little idea of what a program is, and then as that journey progresses, and we're still only in an early part of the way down that path, and other people join it, and it has this life of its own. So I now get the joy from watching others, to watch students do the roles and seeing their enjoyment of it. One of the things I always say to students, that if you're doing stage management for the money, if that's your success criteria, then maybe it's time to find another job right now, or another career, because absolutely we should be being paid fairly, should be being paid the right amount for the work that's required. But also there are other careers which pay much more, but for a far more duller role and job. So I think, if I can get everything I need, if I can pay my bills, if I can do whatever I need to do for myself and my family, then actually that's all I need financially. The shows, some of my best shows, some of the shows where I've gone, that was absolutely one of the best shows for me to work on. That is a success of a show for me. Creatively, have been awful. Because it's not actually, absolutely, you want the show to be fantastic and amazing, but if that magic, that's whatever that means, if it doesn't happen on a particular show because of I don't know, something didn't gel between the creative team, or the source material or the script wasn't right, or it didn't have the right cast gelling, then I'm, as a stage manager, I'm not responsible for that. I can do the best that I can with the team that we have, but that's not my success marker if a show is successful. So if a show gets, or production gets not great reviews or isn't received well, that's not one of my success criteria. But if we can come out of a show, or do a show where everyone has put their 110% into it, have been kind to each other, have enjoyed it, have really worked together, then that's a success criteria for me. I've worked on shows that have been received amazingly well and have, sort of had a legacy and a longer life and gone on to do other things. But the team on it have been awful. And that makes me a little bit sad, but you can't have everything in life.
No, I mean, I 100% agree with you. And I, 1,000% agree with you about the money thing. And obviously that does come from a position of privilege, in the sense that we have been working and we have earned enough money in order to keep ourselves going, which is great. But no, some of the jobs where I've earned the most money have been the unhappiest. And, it's these, you see it on the postcards, don't you? Money isn't everything, and you always think, well, it's bloody useful, isn't it? But actually, sometimes when it's been a huge wage, it's not been nowhere near as joyful, creative, interesting, pleasant than some of the jobs where I've been paid way less money. So for me, money is absolutely not one of the markers. for sure. I do want to talk about Mary Portas because, as we all know, I am obsessed with her. And I worry that I've said this already, but I think it was in a podcast ages ago, so I'm going to go for it again because I want as many people as possible to read her books. And in her book Work Like a Woman, which she always says, she could have actually called it anything, it was just that Work Like a Woman sounded like a great title. Work Like a Decent Human, she talks about circular ambition and how for a lot of men, sorry, this is going to be one of those, how for a lot of men, ambition is very linear. I get the job, I get on the corporate ladder, I go up the ladder, up the ladder, up the ladder to the top. There we are, I am successful. Whereas for a lot of women, what they're looking for, and certainly what I have always been looking for, is a much more circular ambition and hence more circular success. Do you know what I mean? So it's not about having the highest paid job. It's about having work that is creative and fulfilling and having other things in your life, be they a family, be they friends, be they hobbies, whatever, but having more than just this one linear thing that you are aiming for and searching for. And I went to a book signing with Mary Portas where she did a talk first, and she talked about it there, and it was literally like somebody had, switched on 1,000 wattage light bulb on my head, and I was like, oh my goodness, that is me. That is what I have been wanting. And in a weird way, she gave me permission that was okay to have these different things. And after that, I just remember thinking, oh, there we are then. Great. That's me. I have a circular ambition. I don't want to have the highest paid job. I don't want to necessarily be the top person in the team. I actually selfishly want to enjoy what I do. And there's been loads of times when I haven't. Oh my God, I just want to keep putting the disclaimers out there for people who are listening to this going, I hate my job. There's been loads of times when I've hated my job. But overall, my success is the fact that I still enjoy what I do, I think. But that idea of just people defining for themselves what success looks like for them and don't listen to what other people have to say on the topic. She says, ironically, having just made a podcast about this topic. But if success for you is being the stage manager of Hamilton, go and be the stage manager of Hamilton. Brilliant.
Could we spend a little bit of time talking about the success structure in stage management? And we started talking a little bit about this before the podcast, before we started recording. When we go into stage management, you go, right, you go in as ASM, and then you DSM, and then you stage manage, and then, you might get bored and you might get to an age where you go, I don't want to do this anymore, and you go find another career or whatever it is, or you might stay in it. But I can think of one example of a very good friend who loves ASMing and would absolutely remain as an ASM if they could. And they will DSM and they will stage manage, but that's not where their joy is, or that's not where their sort of passion lies. But why is it an expectation in our stage management bubble that that's the success pathway that we should be encouraging when the jobs are so different?
Because the job titles are a hangover from a different era.
And the pay.
And the pay. So I hate all of the job titles. The one I hate the most is deputy stage manager. And funny enough, we're probably going to talk about that in another podcast. But yeah, we've got a system that's from the 1950s and 60s. Because the titles, Jackie, are from a different era. That's where the problem is. So we have this structure of ASM, DSM and SM in the UK that actually belongs to a totally different time, where people went in as an assistant stage manager, and either you were going to be an actor, so you were also an understudy and an assistant stage manager, and deputy stage manager. I think that title probably came the latest, actually, but those titles belong from the old rep situation of the 50s and 60s. And I have a huge amount of truck with those job titles because I don't think they're fit for purpose anymore. But the titles inform the pay brackets. So the ASM is the lowest paid person, the stage manager who, let's face it, in the UK version holds the whole show in their hands during the show, and then you've got the stage manager. But in order to earn more money, you have to go through the ranks to be the stage manager. And those jobs are very different skill sets. I mean, broadly, yes, obviously they're all stage management, but the nuances of those jobs is very different. And not everybody that's a great stage manager is a great deputy stage manager. Oh, this has been such a lovely chat, because I think I worry about the success thing, and I worry about the younger stage managers think that they're not successful if they're not doing those big headline stuff. And everybody's successful. Are we working? Are we creating great theatre? Are we enjoying what we do? She said, almost whispering, because it's like, oh my goodness, don't say that out loud, Antonia. Or do we find joy in what we do? Do we like theatre? Do we think theatre is a worthwhile medium? And should we be pleased with ourselves that we're working? Yeah, absolutely. Regardless of the scale, regardless of whatever it says outside the theatre, as long as we're being properly paid, very important, then isn't all stage management successful?
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand By Please. Join us next time when we'll be discussing what to do when things go wrong. Until then, Antonia and Jackie, off cost.